It's called subbie bashing. And it's a thing. It's a real thing. Subcontractors get bashed. I have walked away from a number of companies that have tried to push me to screw people over. No, I just won't do it. And I will happily, no, I'm off. People trying to con people, people taking advantage of other people and their mentality. There are a serious amount of people that are earning a lot of money that haven't gone on holiday this year, have lost their businesses. Everything can go peak tongue at 8 o'clock in the morning. Rewards can be great, but the risks are goddamn scary.
Welcome to Taking the Con Out of Construction, the straight-talking show that's changing the industry, one episode at a time. Small mistakes can cost big money, and even more in time. But a small investment in listening to this episode could help you avoid disputes, delays, and costly pitfalls, while giving you the know-how to stop problems before they start. Let's turn complexity into clarity and take the con out of construction.
Welcome back to Taking the Con Out of Construction. I'm joined, as always, by Michelle Carr, a passionate voice for change in the industry and someone who's on a mission to make construction clearer, fairer, and more accessible for everyone. In this episode, we're going to discuss what's really going wrong in construction, from cultural challenges to practical problems, and what needs to change to make things better. Michelle, it's wonderful to have you back. I'm really looking forward to this episode. It's exciting to have the opportunity to speak with frank honesty.
Not everyone likes my honesty. You either love me or hate me, unlike my life. So, what's wrong with the industry? One of the reasons I decided to stop freelancing as started as quantity surveyor, then senior surveyor, then commercial manager, then commercial director, then decided to have a couple of kids, and then we had COVID and Grenfell happened all at the same time, so I'm back to commercial director. And then I thought, do you know what, I could do much more for this, because throughout the last probably 5 years or so, I've met a lot of QSs that aren't particularly good. Now, my theory is when I went to university, I started university in 2004, and it was the last year that we had, I think it cost me, if it was £3,000 a year or something like that, but it hiked up from £3,000 a year or £2,000, whatever it was a year, up to 9,000. So I was the last year to get the reduced rates. Now, what I believe that did to the industry in the country is it ended up, especially in quantity surveying, lots of international clients coming, training here, because the British construction industry has a great reputation for building amazing things, and we have some of the best infrastructure apparently in the world. I mean, obviously we're slightly biased from the UK, but there are lots of people that get trained here, especially in quantity surveying, project management, architecture, interior design, engineering, trained in this country through our universities, and then they take their skills elsewhere. There was also a massive drive, there still is, for quantity surveyors particularly to go to Australia, Dubai, a lot of areas in the Middle East, because they wanted UK trained people. So I've been fortunate throughout my career at every level that I've been looking for work. I've never struggled to find work. So I obviously explained in the first episode, I went self-employed purely because somebody wanted to employ me and etc. And I became self-employed, and I've carried it on since then. I've had a number of spouts of employment, direct employment, but most of the time I've been a consultant or whatever, and I've just grown. But at every level I've been, every time I've leveled up, there's always been much more work than there has been QSs, and putting my CV out there to recruitment agents. I mean, it's happened a few times, and no word of a lie, I would get 30 or 40 recruiters ringing me in one day as soon as my CV is live on a job centre. It's been madness the whole way through my career, because there's never been enough QSs. And actually, as I've explained before, I believe, obviously I'm slightly biased, but a lot of people agree that the success of a project depends on the team, and the person that holds everyone together is the QS. And ultimately, it's about the money. It's always about the money in construction. Hope Squared is one of my businesses, and I started that out delivering projects for clients under a limited company. And then my plan was to start to employ people straight out of university and sort of create not a professional practice in the standard sense that you have, because a lot of professional practices are great at what they do, but they very rarely have the on-site experience that I have. And they definitely don't have the experience within like the guts of a company to train people. Obviously, I worked for my dad, and it wasn't until I started working for other people and other businesses that I realized how high my expectations were and what my skill set was, and how I was on a much different level to everybody else, and that I had this extra compared to the ordinary people. So it took me a long time to realize that. But once I did, I thought, well, do you know what I should do? I should train people, because this is what I owe my industry. It's like a duty to the industry, or at least my profession. Get whoever's done a university, employing them. And then, as everybody knows, you do the theory, but the practice was totally different. So I thought fixing the problem would be to employ QSs, train them up, and that was my dream. But actually, the problem's much bigger than that. It's not just about QSs. It's about this industry in general, the standards, the methods, the habits, just the way it is. And that's wrong. And I have worked for a lot of people. I'll be honest, excuse my language. I've worked for a lot of arseholes, and I've made a lot of arseholes a lot of money. And I decided probably about 10 or 15 years ago that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I was only going to work for good people. And although I've only been chartered recently, ethics have always been really strong, and my morals have always been strong. And I would refuse to screw people over. Now, the biggest thing, there's a term that people outside the industry are aware of. It's called subbie bashing. And it's a thing. It's a real thing. Subcontractors get bashed. And basically what happens a lot of the time, it's not all the time, and this is very generic, but you'll have a client. A client wants a building. They design a building. Now, there are many problems with the project life cycle. So the life cycle of a project starts at the concept, the initial idea. Someone has an idea, whether that be a property, a new house, a new building, a new university, a whatever. There's a concept. Now, on the bigger projects, so I'm going to be talking something, let's say, from $1 million plus, and it does happen for smaller projects, but let's just say $1 million plus, you're likely to have a team, a professional team, and that's likely to consist of an architect to start with. Comes up with the concepts and concept plans. You then see whether or not you like to get through planning. You'll have a QS at some point. Now, they may come in at the very beginning. This is the idea of what we were talking about. What's your land? What's your square footage? And they could come up with a budget based on roughly what they want to do. And it's literally, well, I don't know, £1,000 square meters, 300 square meters, whatever. Work out a concept budget from that point. And they could be involved, or they could be involved slightly later. But there's a team, and there's a whole big process that goes on for sometimes years, even decades in some big projects. Years before anyone even knows about it. Sometimes before the land's even purchased, whatever, there's a whole process. Things go wrong in that process too. And it could be the fact that the client doesn't understand, the client hasn't been led properly. It could be the client not being managed properly. So clients cause problems because they don't understand. They are universities, business people, whatever. They're not in construction, they make mistakes. They're not being advised properly, or the architect hasn't quite understood properly, or the architect has had a focus on what it looks like and not its purpose. The project management might not be doing what they're doing. They might just be a bit blasé. The client won't be aware most of the time that in order to get a project delivered, you need your interior design. It has to be 6 months before, or whatever. There's so many things where you've got professionals, but ultimately it is the client's responsibility. But if the client's not being advised properly, then sometimes they're going to make mistakes. Now, what ends up happening, and the reason we get to subbie bashing, is there are so many moving parts. But ultimately, if the money runs out, the architects have been paid, the QSs have been paid most of the time, the planning has been paid, the main structures have been paid. And then what happens is you end up with a load of extras. So the QS hasn't done their job properly. They've missed things out. The architect, there's a whole heap of people that may have not done their job properly. Things have been missed out. The budget has been extended. Nobody expected this. They found, I don't know, unexploded bomb, unlikely, because with surveys these days, one of my clients found an actual horse digging through a basement, and there was a horse. So everyone had to shut down and disappear because potential anthrax. So the whole skeleton of a horse. So yeah, that stopped the project, put the project back for months, costs money. So what happens is you've also got a contractor, and the contractor has a QS that might not have done their job properly, or they missed a caveat, or they didn't put something in the contract properly, or they didn't write the contract properly, and there is no contract. It's not been signed, or it's not been negotiated, or they've missed something when they've purchased the materials, or they haven't priced something right, or the estimator was wrong, or the subcontractor wasn't instructed properly, whatever. There's a whole heap of things that can go wrong. And then with all these mistakes cost money, and delays cost money, and everything costs money. The only way that a contractor, if they don't have the right information, and sometimes it's contractors' fault, they don't have the information to give to the client. Sometimes it's the subcontractor's fault that they don't have the information. I'll explain about that in a second. However, when the pot of money has been spent and it gets smaller and smaller, and whatever it may be, The only way that a contractor, if they don't have the information or they don't have the mindset to do this in the first place or the know-how, they can't get any more money from the client. Or the client says, well, that's it, I'm not paying. If it gets to the point and there's no more money left in the pot, the only option they have to do is basically bash the subcontractor. His final account could be 100,000, could be 100 quid or 10 grand, it could be $1 million. They have a set fee and that's what they priced in. That's based on the variations. Ultimately, there isn't enough money to pay him. So the QS or the client or the main contractor hasn't made enough money. And the only way of making that profit back is basically cutting their costs. And they will just cut the costs on the subcontractor. I've sat there and I've had conversations, and the amount of people that have said to me, oh, I wish I knew 6 months ago, a year ago. To be fair, when you were asking me about why I started this podcast, this is actually one of the reasons which I forgot about. The amount of people I've spoken to at events or even on the phone or been recommended by someone. Oh my God, this is music to my ears. I wish I knew you hear this scenario happening. And the amount of times I've heard about scenarios at your final account stage and a contractor is owed 80, 90, 100, 200 grand, $1 million, whatever it may be. And by the time you're final account stage, the payments have stopped and you've got final account. You have, depending on the contract, between 6 and sometimes 12 months, or I think the minimum is 2 months, 6 months or 12 months. To finalise agreement, you should be getting payments throughout as things are agreed, but theoretically it doesn't always work like that. But you could be sort of a year in, a minimum of 2 months in, where you've already paid this money out. And you sit there and subcontractors will sit in a meeting and they're owed 200,000 and they'll say, oh, but we'll pay you 100,000, 120,000, 180,000, 150,000, 50,000 now. And the subcontractor is so desperate because they need the cash and they don't know how to fight. And it's the way it's always done and they expect it. They just take it because they need that cash, which is wrong on so many levels. They then go and get another project to cover that bill. They're getting a deposit, they'll front load it, whatever it may be, to cover the expense. And robbing Peter to pay Paul is even more dangerous than that. They're getting another project, which they're then going to get screwed on. And the amount of businesses that end up failing, and the reason they failed is not because of what's happened in 2025, it's because they got knocked in 2020. And it might take 5 years and they might hang on for 5 years and they might keep going and keep going. And it's stressful and it's exhausting and the CEOs burn out or whatever. And eventually they just give up and the company goes. But a lot of the time, the knock-on effect, that happened 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, the year before. It might take them down instantly. But a lot of the time, when you really look back into it, for example, my husband works in construction and he works for a company and he's worked for this company for a number of years. This company is, let's say, the subcontractor. They work for a subcontractor, a subcontractor. He's a sub. So you've got the main contractor, explaining the other way around is better. You've got the main contractor is a massive, well-known, one of the biggest main contracting companies in the country. He then subcontracted out to an M&E company, which is mechanical and electrical, that did all of the M&E stuff. They then separated it out and you had a mechanical contractor and you had an electrical contractor. So then the mechanical contractor subbed out to another company, which is who my husband worked for, and then you had him.
Yeah.
Now, the mechanical contractor went into liquidation. £50 million turnover, been going for 35 years. Now, my husband's on site, so the word on the street with them is, oh, it was because the subcontractor didn't pay the subcontractor who didn't pay that and didn't pay that. And now I personally know in this situation, people, actual people that most of them were at my wedding that totally have lost £1 million. And we're talking everyday people. We're not talking billionaires. These people have lost £1 million because of this. Now, the word on the street is this particular company, the subcontractor didn't pay. Now, what I've tried to explain to my husband, and actually the whole process made him understand what I did a little bit better. Some of the problem starts with my husband. Day works are an issue. I hate them. Everyone hates day works. The guys doing day works hate them because they are limited to what they get paid per day. If they're on a price, if they put 25 meters in, they get whatever it is per meter. They can control what they're earning. They can earn a downside more money. When they're on day works, it's capped. And it's normally because they're doing things that can't be priced. The only way that you should do day works is if there is a possibility that a particular item cannot be priced because there's not any information there, or somebody's let someone down, or someone hasn't done what they're supposed to do. And that's how you use day works. It should be a rare thing. However, when you're working on day works, which my husband does far more day works than he ever should, when he's doing day works, what he should be doing is reporting to his supervisor exactly what he's doing, why he's done it, and why they've come about. He's reporting to his supervisor. He started doing it now. So he should tell the supervisor should be reporting that, and he should be issuing it to his boss. His boss then compiles a report, sends it to his contractor. And then basically the information goes up and goes forward, because in law and in the Construction Act and in contract, burden of proof is on the person claiming the money. So for my husband, he needs to prove to his employer that this is what he's done. He's on day works, he's done this amount of work, and this is why. So that he can then promote to the person he's working for. And then he has the backup information to then send it up the chain. Now, the main contractor may or may not know why my husband was on day works. I don't know. He might do. He might be savvy enough to be aware of what's going on, but that's only if he's been in meetings and it's been discussed, but he may not. I wouldn't be surprised if this particular contractor did know exactly what's going on. But anyway, whatever. If he doesn't have the information at this level, then he can't go to the client. He can't get the money himself. So if he can't get paid for it, the subcontractor can't get paid for it. The sub. And theoretically, my husband shouldn't get paid for it. Now, my husband does get paid for it because he's got a different contract with his employer. But ultimately, the person he works for can't get paid for it because he hasn't been able to substantiate it. Now, I'm not saying this is the problem because I didn't get involved, but that could have been the problem. Now, if the client isn't aware of it and it isn't substantiated, the client doesn't pay. But also, on the other hand, if the client isn't aware that he's not making the right decisions and things aren't working correctly, then why should he pay? If the reason that my husband's on day works is because somewhere along the line, someone didn't order the materials, that's not my husband's fault. That's not the client's fault. Now, if that's because when wars break out, it causes bedlam within the industry. And all of a sudden, I remember when the Ukraine war kicked off, to get a roofing material, you're talking 3 to 4 weeks. On a Friday, it was 6 weeks. On the Monday, it was 16. It caused bedlam in projects. So these things happen. And depending on how your contract is, it's different. But ultimately, if it isn't anything like that, what they call force majeure event or something like that, then it's somebody's fault. Now, if somebody of the team that's being employed to carry out a job haven't done what they were supposed to do, that's not the client's fault. So someone else has to take the responsibility. But most of the time, the companies whose fault it is won't take responsibility. They will just deduct it off somebody else. However, in a situation that it is the main contractor's fault, the subcontractor or the subcontractor's fault, if my husband had given the information saying, this is what happened because the materials didn't turn up, or they were wrong, or they were ordered incorrectly, or whatever, or even the drawing was incorrect, then that's the architect's fault. Then if they haven't established that reason, then nobody above him has got a leg to stand on to fight it, substantiate it, or get paid. But my husband still got paid, which is great. But not all people at the bottom level do get paid, not people at the mid level. And there are so many situations that no one gets paid. And that is one of the biggest issues in construction. And that is standard. So that doesn't matter whether you're a decent human being or not. If there isn't communication and you don't know how to put it forward, you don't know what your rights are, you don't understand your contract, you don't understand your contract law. The other thing I was explaining to my husband about variations, for example, and day works is one of them. People don't read their contracts, they don't sign them either. And one of the biggest things I tell people is, if I sent you a contract, but you haven't read it, but you've turned up on site, you've agreed to the terms of those contracts. Now, where it becomes difficult, because I had a client, they wanted me to get contractual with someone. I was like, I can, but you don't have a contract. Well, we sent one. Just because they didn't sign it doesn't mean it. Yeah, that's right. However, you're talking about me issuing a formal letter and getting contractual over completion. So yeah, they have to complete, but the date is blank. And because it hasn't been signed, and because you don't have a record of when they started on site, I obviously wasn't involved at the beginning, you don't have a record. I can't turn around and say, you started on site on this day, therefore from the contract we expected it to be here, therefore your day is here, we're going to hit you with LADs. I can't, because I don't have that basis. Yes, if you're delayed, there's LADs. Yes, there's this scenario and that scenario, but we don't have a start date and we don't have a completion date and we don't have a contract signed on the day it was signed. I can't do anything. I can get contractual, but without all these things, theoretically, I can go, oh, this, that, and the other. There's no collateral warranty either. And you're £1 million into this project. Then they're savvy. They can turn around and go, okay, see you later. Bye. Pull off site because you haven't paid them. They can pull off site and they can stay off site. So you then have two choices. You either pay them to come back and pay through those and put yourself in exposure, or you get another contractor in. But to get another contractor in at this stage, you're going to pay thousands, hundreds of thousands, delay the project, and you've got no warranty. So you've got a building. If you want to go ahead and I'll do that, but you've got no warranty, and you want to take the risk of trying to sell a building without an M&E warranty, fine, I'll go for it. They change their tune very, very quickly. So you can't rely on a contract. There is one, but it's very difficult to argue. And sometimes, depending on most things, when it comes down to contracts, are down to delays and variations. If it's not signed, you have a difficulty in claiming that in front of a court. However, if you do have a contract, whether you signed it or not, and that contract says, and this, I'm using a ridiculous example, if that contract says there are no day works, no variations, no something else, unless Fred stands on his head, Fred ain't standing on his head, you ain't getting paid. Now, that obviously is not going to be in a contract. But if the contract says day works are not viable unless the site supervisor, their supervisor, the subcontractor, the contractor, and the main contractor have all signed a form to agree to those day works, they're not viable. If you haven't done that, you're not getting paid. But you might not find that out until you're in final account. So you could have people working today. You could have 30 people today on site on day works. If you haven't had all those people sign off those day works and you put your application in at the end of this month to be paid, you're not going to get paid that. Could be a payment on account. Now, payment on account is different, but let's just say they've got a payment account. What happens is they go at the end of it, final account stage, well, actually, you've got 200 grand, £1 million, 50 grand, 5 grand, whatever it may be of day works, but you need to substantiate these day works and you need to see, and they quote the contract, whatever the contract says about day works, we need all this proof to approve these day works. So they will just take that money out. And most contractors think there's nothing they can do about it. We're going to go into this in more detail in another podcast, but ultimately there are ways around it. There's judges have gone saying you do a payment on account and then try and screw people at the end. That's not allowed. You can't just do a payment on account. If you keep paying on account and paying on account, then it's deemed to be included. But that's a whole different conversation for another day. These are things that happen. So people don't understand the contracts. Most main contractors, subcontractors, and the bigger companies, they know that their subbies and the people they employ, they know they don't understand the contracts. They know it. And they take that to their advantage. Not all of them. I just want to remind people, I'm saying what's wrong with the construction industry, not what's right with it, what's wrong with it. Not everyone is like this, but these are the things that happen. So in those scenarios, like for example, with my husband's scenario, the company went bust. Man at the top, he's made his money. There's no two doubts about it. I've worked against them before on numerous occasions. They are hardcore. I pre-warned my husband and the person he was working for and the person above that 2 years ago, be careful. They've definitely got their money. Pretty sure the subcontractors got their money because they're sharks. They've then gone to the main contractor and they've gone to the client. They've all got paid. The company in the middle has gone bust. And actually, the directors of that are not convinced they're really suffering, because what normally happens is things are done, stuff is done, they end up okay. But there are a serious amount of people that are earning a lot of money that haven't gone on holiday this year, have lost their businesses, have had to sell their houses, have had to sell their cars, some of them in serious financial problems, some of them in serious mental hospital. My husband's okay. Who he works for had a bit of a hit, but he'll survive. Not everyone that has been hit by and affected by that project is going to be okay. And that is what kills me. Really kills me. And I suppose that is my motivation. I mean, I used to feel quite personal about it and upset, but ultimately I don't like it when I'm employed by someone and I'm making sure that they get paid. It used to make me feel uncomfortable that they would be getting paid, and because they were getting paid, someone else wasn't. But ultimately, I'm fighting for my client that has done that thing and employed me, and I can't be responsible for the people that don't. I can't be responsible for everyone. I mean, I do laugh and joke about it and say, it doesn't sit right with me, because it doesn't. But you employed me, they didn't. So part of the problem as well is generally there's never enough money. So I've worked for a lot of main contractors, and I do think main contractors are probably the most responsible for what's wrong in the industry. Main contractors, especially the big ones, they'll come up with the whole, oh yeah, we've got a crisis, blah, 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 blah. They're increasing house prices left, right and centre. You've got a new build house comes up and they're 800,000 and 900,000 for whatever. My own home is like worth just under 700,000. You can't swing a cat in it, but it's a 4-bedroom townhouse on the outskirts of London. It's ridiculous. It's not worth that. But it's only worth that because developers have built it and they put a price tag on it when we bought it. And that then brings up the prices and all the houses around it. And none of them are worth that kind of money. It's ridiculous. So there's one issue. And then there's a credit crisis. You look at their profits, not even touched, not a dip, nothing. So that's one of the issues. But I think for me, working with the contractors and the subcontractors that I've been working with more recently, my theory is some of these problems start back in school. And I don't know about now, because I think things are quite different now. But bearing in mind, I'm 40 something. Most of my clients are either in their 40s, 50s, sometimes 60s, whatever. But they've obviously come back from an education standpoint that I did. And they were told at school, you need to get a trade. We recommend you get a trade. Don't bother doing A-levels, get an apprenticeship, you need to do a trade. Basically, you're thick, is how they see it. They never said that, but that's how these kids would see it. And obviously most of the men, and they're like, you need to get a trade because they're not academic. So they go into a trade and they become an electrician, plumber, decorator, floor layer, whatever. And then these people have a bit about them. So an entrepreneur, before we even knew what entrepreneurs were, they had something about them. So I thought, I want a bit more, whatever their motivation may be. Probably started with a car, then they wanted a house, then they wanted this, then they wanted that. So ultimately they started to work harder and harder and harder. And then they had something about them and they started to build a team, or they got promoted. Next minute they're running their business. Next minute they've got employing 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200, 300 people. They're turning over 500 grand, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, whatever it may be. But inside, there's still that 16-year-old boy that was told they were thick and was never going to be anything and had to do a trade. So then what happens is they don't know the Construction Act. They don't understand a JCT contract. I'm a QS. And it took me, I would probably say, 5 to 10 years to really get my head around a JCT contract. And then they changed them. And then they changed them again. And then solicitors love to amend them and amend everything that's about a JCT outside of a JCT. So you've got a JCT that's a big enough contract as it is with 70, 80, 100 pages of amendments. It's madness. So I've got a QS degree. I am academic. I also have a HND in law. So I understand the equal speed. And it still took me years to get my head around a contract.
Yeah.
How does anyone expect, as a business owner in construction who started on a trade, who isn't particularly academic, to fully understand a contract? And JCTs are the worst. And I still struggle with it. And sometimes I have to read it 3 or 4 times. The due date is this date, but 7 days before the due date, you do this. And the due date is 7 days after this date, but 4 days before this day, and 15 days before that day. It's nonsense. I mean, I simplify it, and I've even got a spreadsheet that's like, this is what's what, and you put one day and it figures out the rest of them. I give it to all my clients anyway, and I make sure they give it to their subcontractors. So everyone needs to know what needs to be in when. And then you have to play around with bloody bank holidays and stuff, but whatever. Like, that's the kind of idea of what we do. And that's just an example. And it's legal speed. NEC is much simpler, but again, we'll go into that into context. But how are these people that have built this business, they don't necessarily understand how contracts work. They're not always great on a PC. They're not great at Excel, for example. So they need to explain what they're due to a QS, right? A QS who generally is academic, loves numbers. Excel's our best friend. I mean, the amount of QSs that I know that have their expenditure, their timelines, they've got a spreadsheet for it. My brother should have been a QS. He's got spreadsheets for everything. They're the kind of people, and they see black and white. Whereas a lot of these business owners are quite creative. They own money out of their hands. Okay, oh, they don't now, That's where they started. Electrician putting things together, plumbers putting things together, engineering, bricklaying, whatever. It's hands. It's all about hands. It's a different brain set. So you're trying to get somebody that works with their hands to communicate with someone that works with their mind. And it's different. So that level of communication is where I help people a lot. It's just getting them to communicate. The other thing you've got with the construction industry, that QS, depending, because some bright spark has decided that either you issue the contract and everyone gets paid on the same day, and most of them, they have to do it at the end of the month. So the accounts department have got all the payroll to do, holidays, sickness. If they've got a factory or people on day works, figure that out. They've got to get all their other expenses, rent, whatever else. They've all got to get out, and they've got to pay all their subcontractors in the same week. Madness. But that's what they do. So then a QS could have 17, 20, 25 applications for payment to look at in 1 week. That's a lot. Or they're every single day and you've got applications coming in left, right and centre. That doesn't help either. But these are the kind of things that happen. So you're dealing with a human being that's overworked most of the time, because if you're a decent QS, you are not doing your 8 hours. Although some QSs, the reason that may not be classed as decent because they do too much, but whatever, different conversation. So you've got QS that's got all these different applications for payment. You've got an accounts department that are going, we need to know this, that, and the other. You've then got a funder potentially that might be arguing because you've tried to pay something. You might have been pushed by your directors to overvalue for a fund drawdown, and that was overvalued because you were told to front end a project because they needed cash for something else. That money's now gone. Now all of a sudden you've got all these applications for payment. They total to 1.2 million. You've only got 800 grand because either the valuation's gone or they need more money's gone somewhere else in the business or whatever. And if you've got 2 or 3 projects on the go and all of these are the same, you've then got 3 different sites to go around. All of a sudden, like, it's chaos. Now, what happens with QSs is they will do what they need to do. They're under pressure, but ultimately someone's paying out. I turn around and go, tough. No, I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I've got law experience. I know how contracts work. I always cover my backside. But I've also had to have these conversations. Oh, the director's on holiday. Oh, we didn't have this. Oh, we didn't have that. Oh, we didn't have something else. Said all of those things. I've been there sitting there and people ringing and trying to avoid phone calls because they're chasing money and you can't give it to them. It's awful. It's horrible. I've told directors on a million times, tell me, if you haven't got the money, tell me. I will tell them they're not getting paid. They'd rather know they're not getting paid than wait for the money thinking it's coming. And then they've got all these people they need to pay and they can't pay them. Tell them in advance. They'll sort something out.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it better. It's not right, but it makes it easier for them. And I don't get the information. The next minute, the first time I find out that my subbie hasn't been paid is when he hasn't been paid and he phones me up and tells me, like, these are the things that are wrong on the other side of it. But one of the things that also I try to encourage people to do, if they're subcontractors or main contractors or anyone, the burden of proof to substantiate any claim and what you'll do is on you, the person that's claiming it. So make it simple. Get your application for payment in a way that can't be argued. And these are some of the things that we're going to be talking about in more detail, but these are things that are wrong with the industry. So lack of experience, lack of good quality consultants, clients not understanding the industry, people thinking that construction is easy, people trying to con people, people taking advantage of other people and their mentality. Some of them are just upright, stuck up snobs that think they're better than everybody else. Those other people that absolutely love making money and they don't give up monkeys who they screw in the process. So many of them in construction is all about how much money they make. And sometimes it's not even money they're making for them. It's the fact they get a buzz of making money for somebody else. It's the whole power trip on whoever knows the most, taking advantage of the smaller people because that's the way it's always been done. Bollocks to that. Bollocks to that. And I have walked away from a number of companies that have tried to push me to screw people over. No, I just won't do it. And I will happily, no, I'm off. I will value works that are entitled, and if they can't pay for it, that's their problem. It's not mine. I'm not screwing someone and going against my ethics. I will go within the contract because ultimately, if it came down to it, I can get sued. I don't want to be in court arguing why I've done something wrong. But also, I then support contractors to make sure that they do give me the information. But make things simple, like don't have something overcomplicated, because as a QS, you're just think, oh my God, I'm going to put it here or put it there. Oh, I can't deal with that today. And you'll just do the ones that are easy. But again, I'll go into this in more detail when we talk about variations and applications for payment. But these are the things that are wrong with it. There is a mindset that the amount of my clients, and one of my clients, really good client, got into a little bit of trouble with a project just before Christmas. All of a sudden, the day before we broke down for Christmas, got a pay less notice. We're not paying you. But you'd already paid everybody out because it was a decent person. Anyway, pay less notice wasn't valued. All got very nasty. They're now on their third project with this client after I renegotiated the contract, and it was all good for free. Stressful. Anyway, he had a meeting with one of the top directors of this multi-million pound company. And I was sitting there. So he was on the phone. I've been sitting there with a pad, and I'm like putting up things. And I wrote on A3, they need you. An electrical contractor that had installed a whole load of systems. There was no contract. There was a purchase order that said this purchase order is final and basically overrides any communication. So they had a whole JCT contract that wasn't signed, but then they sent a purchase order for a £1.5 million contract. And it said anything said before is null and void. So they had nothing. They had no warranty. They had absolutely nothing. And they had paid 700 grand for a £1.2 million contract. They were exposed. The client was exposed. Now, my client's a really decent person. Well, I won't work for anybody that isn't. He didn't want to rip him off. He just wanted to get paid what he was entitled to. And the client was being unrealistic. So anyway, I rattled a few cages, as I do. And I love it when somebody phones my client and goes, why are they getting contractual? Because that's what I'm paid to do. And ultimately, that's what we've got. So anyway, they need you. And then I was sitting there and literally scribbling in big writes, like, don't wobble, stand your ground, whatever. And he did. Stood his ground. We had this big meeting, solicitors there. And when I walk into the meeting, this happens all the time. I walk into the meeting, everyone's all frosty. And they're trying to crush my hands with their handshake. And I will handshake and crush their hand back. Like, I'm used to it. I've been doing this a long time. At the end of the meeting, when everything had been agreed, and I'd explained to them how their contract screwed them over and how it was wrong and it didn't make any sense and it was a pile of crap. Once I'd gone through all of that and explained what each clause meant to them as a business, because I had said to my client, this contract doesn't work for them. It needs to work for both of you. Gave me a raised eyebrow, which most of my clients do. The contract has to work for both parties. I'll go into this in more detail, but the contract has to work for both parties. When you start telling people you don't like a clause, but you explain to that person it doesn't suit them either, really easy to get out. The end of this particular meeting, it happens all the time. I don't get the one handshake. I get the two handshake. Thank you. Genuinely lovely to meet you. When I walk into the meeting, I'm the biggest bitch on the planet. They're going to take me down. They're going to put this stupid little woman in her place. I know that's the attitude they have of much of those words. And you can tell by the look in their eye and the way they try to crush my hand. And I smile. Love it. The very end of it. And then and it's a genuine thank you, because I've saved their ass. And I'm not even working for them. I've saved their ass for free, theoretically. And they genuinely thank you. It's a pleasure. No problem. Since then, it was all Pete. It was all, everyone was agitated. That was 2 years ago now, I think. I made my client, 90, 100 grand on renegotiating that deal. I then made them more and more money on that. They've ended up extending. They've had more work. And they're now on their third project with the same client. On the same contract. And they've had no disputes, no fallout, nothing. It's been sweet as pie. No issue whatsoever, because they both understood what they'd signed up to and it was done. And also, they know full well they're not going to be taken advantage of. I mean, you don't want to be on the wrong side of a negotiating table for me, that's for sure. But I'm always fair. I'm always reasonable and honest. And it is what it is. Okay, don't get me wrong. Contracts are down to interpretation, and I will I'll interpret it any way I blooming well like. However, I'm always honest and fair with people, and I can go out Rottweiler or I can go atomic. And I always say to my clients, how do you want to go? We can go nicey, we can blow up a few bridges, or we can go atomic. And if you never want to work with this company again, never want to hear from them, and erase them from your memory, let's go atomic. But most of the time I calm them down and we go sort of reasonable. We'll leave the atomic till after. But I do stand their grounds and I support them, and I'm not a force to be messed with. And I have that ethos, and that's what I support my clients with. Then all of a sudden, I see them walking differently. I see them standing differently. I see them holding themselves, and then you hear a conversation, or I'm on a board meeting with someone and then they're educating someone else. They don't have to give me the credit for it and shout my name and this is amazing, because I don't really like it. I'm not going to lie. And then you hear them educating someone else on something else I've told them. And I'm like, yeah, we're making it. Because then they'll be telling someone else, or then I'll deal with another contractor that they use elsewhere. They have a conversation and they'll then repeat back what I trained them in. And not being funny, there is another way. The construction industry, the biggest thing that's wrong with the construction industry is all the things that are wrong with the construction industry have been wrong with the construction industry for 100 years. And we had this whole big, massive Construction Act that was basically put in to stop people from ripping people off, and not that much has changed. It's changed a bit, but nowhere near enough. And so, again, that's why I want to talk about the Construction Act on the next podcast, because people need to understand what that means, where it came from, what it's supposed to be, and how you use it. But the biggest thing is lack of education, lack of experience, lack of understanding, but lack of confidence. I'm not the type of person you don't pay, but I've experienced it in times. The other thing is client expectations and client hoops. I've jumped through hoops with my clients. I've gone above and beyond many times, to my detriment, to the point that I've ended up in hospital for it. And every now and again, I fall into that trap because that's what we do. And then I think, Jesus Christ, 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm writing emails, or midnight, or I haven't seen my kids. My kids are kicking off because they haven't seen me or whatever. I just think, Jesus Christ, I'm not being paid for do this. This isn't my business. This isn't my fault. This is your business. And I have to set a boundary. But I do it all the time. But it's funny how many conversations I have with people and, oh, yeah, but they're a good client. And the next minute you're talking in another board meeting. This client hasn't paid 70 days late, 60 days late, 15 days, whatever. Okay. So we're jumping through hoops. This client, oh, we're not going to do an EOT because we get loads of work from this client. Why are you not charging an EOT, not charging what you're welcome to, not getting contractual on a client that gives you plenty of work? You're not making any money out of it. Yeah, we are. We're making 20%. Okay. So you've got £8 million turnover, making 20% profit, and you've got no cash. That doesn't add up to me.
Absolutely not.
And then I get dazed looks. This is the beginning when I first started. Normally in the initial conversations I'm having with people anyway, when I start getting on their board or working with them a bit more closely, a lot of the time is communication is the biggest problem in the construction industry. I probably should have started with that. Directors making decisions on wrong information. Somebody told them that they've added 20% to the profit. They've got a 20% margin. But actually that's only if they estimated it properly and they managed to sell each package properly. But also, and that only happens if the site manager's wages are included in that, and the costs that go with the site manager, his phone, his car, his holiday, whatever. That's only if all the project costs are there, and also if they're being delivered properly. One of the other big things that's wrong in the construction industry, especially when it comes to subcontractors and main contractors, is the directors are making a decision on misinformation. So that example, and that's a live example of a company I was working with, 20% profit, £8 million company, no cash. And I said, right, you need to put an EOT on this client. No, we've got loads of clients with them. We're making 20%. First thing I did, went to accounts. I need this, and this. Understood. Put a document together. They weren't making 20%. They were losing 5%. They were losing 5%. And the project was already 3 months over and was going to last another 3 months. They were losing 5% as it was. They were going to lose 20 to 25 to 30% on that project. Imagine how quickly that guy got on the phone to that client, and next minute there was a meeting where EOT, blah, 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 blah. But the whole time he thought that he had 3 or 4 projects, they were all making 20%. Yeah, it's great. And they used to go and play golf together, or they'd buy lunch or whatever, and they had this whole social thing, and they got on great, and the client's phoning up and they're having a chit chat and they're buddies and everything's amazing. Then when I deliver a document, I didn't even have to say anything, and he sees that bottom line, everything changed. Everything changed. So a lot of the time, where the magic comes from, for me, is actually presenting information. And I've had a few people in my past that I've worked with, and I've had a few women that I've worked for that have got very frustrated with me because people listen to me and they haven't listened to them. Because you can say something 100 times. If they don't get it the first time, they're not going to get it the last time. Communication is about how it's being received. And if they're not understanding what you're saying, then you need to find a way to make them understand. And that's what I'm quite good at. And I started it doing contract synopsis. So when I'd agree a contract with someone, and if I'm reviewing a contract, I do like a red light system. definitely do not agree to these. These need to be like, this needs, not in a million years, don't agree to it.
Yeah.
This one is okay, but it needs an amendment. This one, it's not a major thing, but let's give them something that they can say, no, we're not changing it. It's kind of how it works. And then once I've agreed a contract and it's all signed, I then do a synopsis for their team to say, right, if you need a variation or day works or whatever it may be, this is what you do. And in that synopsis is this happens, call me. And there's my number, email address, whatever. You need to call me in these circumstances. I need to deal with this. But then doing that and then explaining, going through it with people, and they might not necessarily understand, and working not just with the directors, but with the people within the team and every aspect and every level and every different company that I've worked for and in and out, and they all work differently. And I've had this experience of all the different systems and possible known to man, what works for some people, what doesn't. I've learned how to communicate, and sometimes it's just about how you deliver information. Some people are visual, some people like to listen to it, some people like to read it, whatever. It's how you're delivering the message, and that's another thing in construction. And partly, and I'm not being sexist, there aren't enough women in construction because women have a way of explaining things, and men can be, this is not a detriment, men can be sort of single-minded and focused, and they're like, not binary as such, but they're a bit more, it's this or this. Very generic, obviously. Women are much different, and obviously a lot of women have, generally, in the way that it's always been, are much more involved with explaining things to children, whereas obviously the tradition, I know we've moved on from that, we're in 2025, but it's just a skill set. Women are better at organising things and can be understanding, and also sometimes when you've got men battling men, there's egos and all these other bits and pieces, and I've worked with many companies that have come in and go, oh, it's nothing about a cockfight, and I'm like, no problem, yeah, you ain't going to win, it's all everyone standing there puffing their chest out, blah, blah, blah. First of all, best person to win a cockfight is the person without the cock, and when we're puffing chests out, I'm way in advance. And they will turn around and laugh at me every single time, probably feel really uncomfortable, because I tend to do that to people anyway, but that's the best way to sort of get around, and then next minute, deliver. And sometimes that happens, and there's egos and other bits and pieces, but when you come in there as a female, it changes the dynamics, and sometimes you can just communicate things better, and I can say things that men wouldn't say or couldn't say or whatever, and it just has a different direction, and it's about communication. So your point of what's wrong in the industry, first of all, the people that are conning the industry and the arseholes and sharks or whatever you want to call them in the industry that know they're doing wrong and get a kick out of it. You've also got the fact that these play on the fact that a lot of business owners as subcontractors, for example, and main contractors and anyone in the industry have a little boy, well, mainly little boys, maybe little girls inside them thinking, I'm thick, so therefore I can't work with an academic. And I will teach them, for example, you're going up against someone who's employed. You have built a business from nothing. You've got 100 people working for you. You run 35 vans. You've got this, you've got that. You're up against someone that's employed that gets told when they can and can't work and when they go on holiday or not. Not that there's anything wrong with being employed, but ultimately, why are you intimidated by this person? Look what you've done. Look what you've achieved. You're not on the back foot. You're not thick. You're not stupid. You're successful. Like, you have delivered as well. They should be thanking you, not screwing you. And flipping the mindset, that's sort of one of the industries. The fact that people don't understand the legalities and the recourse and the way to administer a contract in their favour is a massive big thing. The fact that people don't take responsibility for their mistakes and don't know how to, and actually the person that gets paid is the one that shouts the loudest, is also wrong. The other key thing is communication. And I think there are many people that I've met over the last 20 or 30 years that think women QSs especially are incredible if they're the right women. And there's a lot of women that don't do us any favours and don't act in the right way. And I've been one of them myself that's coming all aggressive. And the best way to deal with men is being in your feminine energy, not your masculine. It's much more powerful. But I've been aggressive and whatever. And yeah, there are some women that don't make it easy and really make life difficult within the industry. But that's, again, a different topic. There's that. But communication, not enough women, not people understanding things, and people making decisions on the wrong information. Like, these are probably the key things that I find. Not understanding legislation. And the fact that legislation changes all the time, not employing the right professionals, but not all professionals are equal. Some architects are really great with things looking pretty, but have got no idea of cost, or some architects have a great idea of cost, but don't actually know how things work and go together and technical. They can make it look pretty, but they don't design it. There are structural engineers that don't understand risk, and they will just, you've got 20 tons of steel and it's a 1-story building. It would withstand a atomic bomb. It's a shed. Do you know, like, I'm being dramatic, obviously, but not everyone's equal and things are different level. But also construction is just crazy, and everything can go peak tongue at 8 o'clock in the morning and your day's never planned, which is one of the things I probably deep down love about it. And I think we all love about it, but it's also really goddamn annoying, especially when you've got 4 projects all going wrong all the same time. It's just like, really? But then you get the buzz of it and it's still being fixed and everything's great. But it's exciting. It's constantly changing. The rewards can be great, but the risks are goddamn scary.
Would you say the best way is by empowering the subbies? Somebody who's been in the industry for probably getting on 30, 40, 50 years. Things have changed so often. Their knowledge might be outdated and perhaps they just haven't got the confidence to re-educate themselves. So it's arming them with that knowledge to be able to stand up against these people.
Yes, but also it's about the people that are sort of coming to the end of their careers potentially. A lot of them did a lot of their business on a handshake. And there are people, and I've watched them. Yeah. Tried to mug me off, and I have been mugged off. I mean, I have been mugged off in the industry and screwed over and all the rest of it. And it's just like, wow, because there are a lot of people that don't have any integrity. So now you have to back everything up. And there's a lot of people that are incredible at what they do. I mean, I remember coming out of a meeting with an architect once, and we just met a subbie. And as we walked out of the meeting, we saw the subbie's vehicle with a personalised number plate. It was a nice vehicle. And he said to me, "What does that make you think?" Because a QS, he was an architect. "What does that make you think? Will you double check his price?" I said, "Not really." I said, "He's either conning me," which I double check his price anyway. I'm not going to change the way that I deal with him just because I've seen his car, or he's incredibly good at what he does. One or the other. And it was a bit of both. But ultimately, I will then make sure for my clients, but in that scenario, for my clients, I would make sure that the contract is right, that there's an understanding that he knows what he's doing and that he will be protected, that if he's tried to pull a fast one, he's not going to get away with it. But these guys don't know how to do that. And sometimes they're intimidated by technology. I mean, Jesus, I'm feeling really old these days because I have to get my 19-year-old to sort of, "Leah, fix it. I don't know what's doing, what's happening, what's going on. Just fix it." Like TikTok. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. She's 10 years older than me about TikTok. And I was like, "No, I can't." I said, "Well, one, because Leah's always going in about, I saw this on TikTok, this." And I was like, "That would just mean I'm going to be shopping and a whole heap of crap I don't need." And she was like, "Yeah, it's better than that." And two, I don't really know how it works. So I'm like, well. And then last I was scared to set me up an account or whatever. And I'm pretty techie, but do you know what I mean? Like, and if I'm struggling in my early 40s, probably mid 40s now, but if I'm struggling, sometimes I see the things that my dad does. He frustrates me at the time. And my friend will go, "Oh, your dad's doing really well." He's like, "You remember how old he is?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I suppose." But he's my dad, so of course I'm intolerant. But you just look at things, and some of these guys just don't understand. It's just not done the same way it's done. And they are based on integrity. And they're the kind of people I like to work for. And the way that I deal with people and interact with people, you could get 50 people in a room that have had an interaction with me, and you'll get 5 or 6 different opinions. I'm either an angel, the nicest person, a superstar. I mean, I'm known as a guardian angel of construction, a construction alchemist, intelligent, this and the other, but there will be people in there that will tell you I'm the biggest bitch on the planet, that I'm hardcore, that I'm a Rockweiler, that I'm a pitbull, whatever. I don't care either way. But ultimately, if you're a decent person, then I'll treat you in a decent way. If you're trying to screw my contractor, good luck. And I have no qualms. I mean, we play balls and play different games, but the amount of people that I know have recently, working for one of my clients, I've been working for a number of years, and this woman was getting bullied by this man really badly. Really badly. Well, that got my back up, didn't it? Of course it did. And I had to check myself, to be fair, because I wrote this email and I rewrote and reread it and reread it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And I was like, actually, do you know what? When I had the conversation, I was like, I want to go all guns blazing because I'm really annoyed about what he's done. But actually, I don't know whether that's going to serve a purpose. So I think what we should do is do this and go nicely. and then see what happens. And I did go dancing, and then they were really blasé about it. And in the end, I was like, you are just showing how inexperienced you are in contract. And actually, this is where my client stands. At the moment, he's telling me not to go down this route, but I reserve the right to, and you need to pay this money or I'm going to take you for everything you've got, in an official way, obviously not quite like that. All of a sudden it gets their attention. And this is sometimes it's about playing the game and getting someone's attention. And sometimes going in atomic doesn't do us any favors. Sometimes it's just a misalignment of understanding. Sometimes it's just somebody not quite getting something they haven't communicated properly. So there is a skill to it, which is where the magic comes from and the alchemy and construction alchemy. But yeah, it's difficult. But it depends on the person and how I defend them and how I educate them. But in all honesty, I kind of sometimes refer myself to Nanny McPhee. And Nanny McPhee says something along the lines of, when you need me, you don't want me. When you want me, you no longer need me. And that's kind of how I work. So again, part of the podcast, the reason for it is to empower people and say, look, there is another way and you can do that, to give people confidence. But also, when it comes to doing it, there are different ways of doing it. And ultimately, when I work with clients, the idea is not for me to be there constantly. I don't make myself indispensable, because that's not how I want to be. I want to be the person that when it comes to payroll, one of the first people you want to pay because I'm bringing value. What tends to happen for construction alchemy anyway, not for H Squared, I work with them for a set amount of time, and then I think they need 6 months, could be 12 months, could be 3 months, could be a month, could be whatever, could be a couple of workshops, whatever the problem is. I tend to work with them, get them working properly. I'm a bit of a mechanic, turn the company into a well-oiled machine, get over whatever it is, whether it's a growth period or after growth or prep for growth or nightmare clients or somebody's left and taken everything with them and companies like falling apart around them, whatever. Sometimes directors are wanting to leave, they're preparing to sell. It's whole different scenarios. But ultimately, I get them to the point that they don't need me anymore. And then there's a situation that there's a confidence thing. And I'm like, okay, fine. You keep me on a retainer for a little while. And then it happens. A month goes by, a couple of phone calls, maybe a few email. Second month, a little less. Third month, I'm like, listen, you don't need this retainer anymore and you don't need me. I'll always be at the end of the phone. If you've got a problem, call me, reach out. Don't need to be paying me a retainer because you're wasting your money. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. And then sometimes I'll just call to catch up, bump into them at a meeting, liaise with them whether somebody else are involved, because it's a small world in construction, it really is. Or they're just phoning to see it, or get a Christmas card or whatever. Or they'll phone me and go, Michelle, I've got a problem. Fine, no problem. Send me the info. But at this point, they know exactly what information I need. And most of the time, it's not that difficult to deal with. It's just a client being difficult. They're protected and they've done everything they're supposed to be. And they just need me to come in and say, hey, Mr. Client, by the way, this is the situation you're in. Pay your money or I'm coming after you type scenario. But yeah, that it's not about me working for hundreds and hundreds of people for the rest of my life. That's not how I want to be. It's about empowering people and letting them work on their own.
And breaking some of those vicious cycles that we've touched upon.
I'm a mother at the end of the day, and there's no point in just punishing people and allowing things to go on. You have to educate them. And you also need to allow people to make their own mistakes to some extent, but you just have to find a way to work it and defend them, but teach them to do the thing. And that's kind of what I do with businesses. But also, the amount of times I hear my children talking to other children, oh, this is what you should do. And what I've taught my child will then empower another child or moving forward. And business is so different. So I then talk to them and they'll be on a golf day or they'll be talking to somebody else. And yes, those people might phone me and go, oh, you need to speak to Michelle. Like the shit's hit the fan and you need to speak to Michelle. Fine. I get a phone call and I help them out. And don't get me wrong, I'm great at that. And when I've helped people and they're in trouble and they think they're losing their business or the shirt on the back or whatever, like the intensity is there. And trust me, when I get them out of it, they can't wait to pay me. And these are the kind of people I send an invoice and I'm paid like before the end of the day. Like it's crazy. And as much as that's amazing that they feel that way, I don't really want to be dealing with that stress and I don't want them to be in that stress either. And I will still do that. But part of the reason behind the podcast and everything else that I'm doing is so that you don't get to that stage, that people understand that there is another way. And actually, I was talking on a podcast with someone and I was telling them about the situation with my husband and that company that went bust and what could I have done and at what point could I have changed it. And so I explained at this point I could have done this and this point I could have done that. And even the day that they were told they were going bust, because it didn't go into liquidation quite some time, I still could have fixed something at that point. But anyway, whatever, it didn't happen. There are always ways, but the later it is to that point, the more intense it is. And it's stressful for everybody. So if I can get people thinking slightly different so they don't get to that, it's like, I don't really want my phone ringing, I'm in trouble. Because it's a lot of energy. And yes, the amount of clients that have said to me, invoice me whatever you want, you've saved my business, like I'll just pay it. I mean, that's a really weird place to be. You just think, oh, I don't really know what to do there. I don't take the mick though, if that makes sense. Like, charge me what you want, I'll pay it. I mean, Jesus, that's exposing yourself, isn't it? But I suppose at this point they know I'm integral and I would never take advantage because they're never going to come back. And that's just not what I'm about. It's not about getting a quick fix and a quick hit of money. It's about changing the industry, changing them and being me.
That's actually quite an uncomfortable situation for somebody like you to be in. Bill me what you want.
Yeah. I'm a bit more used to it now. I'm a bit more used to it. The first time it happened, I'm like, you fret about sending the invoice and then you're in that whole uncomfortable thing. Your palms start sweating. You just think, are they going to think I'm taking the mick or this, that, and the other? And next minute you see joke, money's in your bank. You're like, oh. And then you're like, maybe I didn't charge enough. Like, whenever I laugh and joke, and my husband go, we clearly didn't charge enough than if they paid it that quick. But that's obviously our husband and wife dynamics. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with that. It's a job well done and a reasonable amount of money.
Well, I can certainly understand now where this name, Guardian Angel of Construction, has come from. It makes so much more sense to me now. We've explored some of the big challenges facing the construction industry, and we're going to hopefully start to put those right from this podcast. In the next episode, we'll break down the Construction Act, and it's not going to be boring. That's the one thing that I've learned quickly with Michelle. She makes everything very interesting and engaging. Michelle, thank you so much for being so open and honest today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
If you found value in today's episode, hit subscribe so you never miss a new release, and share it with someone in the industry who needs to hear it. To learn more, access resources, or find out how Michelle Carr and Construction Alchemy can help you protect your projects, solve problems, and boost your profits, visit constructionalchemy.co.uk. Together, we can change the industry, one project, one company, and one episode at a time. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are based on the personal experiences of Michelle Carr and her guests. They are for general information only and should not be relied upon as professional or legal advice. Always seek your own independent advice before making decisions. Neither Michelle Carr nor Construction Alchemy accepts liability for any loss, damage, or consequences arising from actions taken based on this podcast. Thank you for listening.